Hey and welcome to the Reddit Face YouTube channel, where today we're looking at this question on AskReddit. In honor of Denver's decriminalization of magic mushrooms, doctors of Reddit, what, if any, is your best story of patients on hallucinogenics? And if you who are watching this video have any stories of your own, please leave that in the comment section so that I can use it in a later video. That'd be sick. Was working night shift on inpatient service. Edie called to admit someone. We've got a 17-year-old down here with altered mental status. We think he needs to be admitted for monitoring, VSS, chem fine, etc, etc. Now, I'm not a pediatrician. I don't do kids. I don't understand why the ED is calling me, but I'm an intern, and it's 2 in the morning, so arguing about it would be stupid. I headed to the ED. I get there to see a young dude sitting there with his parents. I'll mention that his dad was a full-bird colonel and very much fit the archetype, and his mom seemed to fit that type of personality too. The kid is literally rolling around in his bed, alternating between crying, asking if he was going to die, rubbing his dad's hand, and telling him how much he loved him. I had to sit there and take a history with a straight face from a 17-year-old who kept being distracted by just how much he loved his dad. I think my first question was, "Did you take anything tonight?" And he was straight up and said, "Oh yeah, like a ton of acid. Want any?" I 100% laughed at this statement. His dad was not amused. The patient was discharged the next morning. I had a patient who had taken an ungodly amount of Benadryl in a failed suicide attempt. A lot of people think that since it makes you drowsy, a bunch of it might be able to kill them in their sleep. Instead of killing them though, Benadryl basically gives you the absolutely terrifying hallucinations for like 24 hours or more, and then leaves you with the worst multi-day hangover you have ever had in your life. He would not stop yelling and screaming about that goddamn cat poking its head out of the ceiling ties every single time I left the room. He also had short bursts of thinking he was covered in bugs, and I would find him stripped naked and yelling into the wall. Freaking ceiling cat, he sees you every time. Oh man, I've done this before. Benadryl is a deliriant, and after it hit me, I had to get my brother to drive me to the ER. The glove container in the room had a small glove on the front that wouldn't stop waving at me. Transparent flies all in the air. A cone right outside my door kept vibrating. 0 out of 10, never again. I had a guy who was freaking out, thinking he was going to die because he thought he had eaten too many hallucinogenic mushrooms. He went online and saw that sometimes patients are given active charcoal to soak up the mushrooms in the stomach. Not entirely true, by the way. So he goes outside and starts shoving down on charcoal briquettes that he has in his garage for grilling. After about a dozen, he realizes, holy mother, I'm eating charcoal briquettes. Now he's really freaking out, so he grabs his dog, as he thinks he is never coming back to his house, and drives himself to the ED. He parks out front, walks into triage with the pup, black charcoal all over his face and hands, and says, "I need a doctor and someone to watch my dog when I die." That's actually really considerate of the dog, if he was worried that nobody else would show up to take care of it in time following his demise. Yeah, dog was a bro for driving him to the ED. Gosh. Had a friend become impatient with mushrooms once. He took an 8 and an hour later decided they weren't very strong. So the most logical thing to do would be eat his other 8. Cut to 2 hours later and he's parked on the top of a parking garage. Tried to drive across town when they kicked in and he immediately realized his F up. He tried to wait it out, but after being abandoned by everyone else, I wasn't around. No way in hell would I have left that poor guy with 7 grams of shrooms in his own devices. And he decides he needs help. So he calls 911. While on the phone, he wants to be as honest as possible. Only it comes out as, "There's a gun in the car." He says he was tripping and sweating so badly. It was July. The next thing he remembers is hearing a tink 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 and looking up to being surrounded by police, guns drawn and ready for anything. Fred isn't a danger though, so they get him in an ambulance and give him charcoal to induce vomiting. The rest of the night is a blur for him and he wakes up cuffed to the bed. They asked him if there's anyone he can call for a ride, and he tells them his mom is a nurse who works on the second floor. Apparently while tripping, he kept telling them to go upstairs and get mom. So they all have a chuckle, realizing his mom really was upstairs. Had a woman come into the ED after ingesting some PCP. She was convinced she was dead and kept telling me she didn't get her last rites. At one point, she stripped off all her clothes and shat the bed. Also mistook me for Jesus at one point. She was freaking out for nearly 24 hours. Nurse here. Used to work the night shift in a very small rural ED in North Carolina. We had a couple in their 20s get picked up by the local police. They were found in their car, stopped on the train tracks, looking lost and confused. They had somehow made it to Raleigh and were attempting to get to the beach. We don't know exactly when they decided to take the LSD. So they're brought into the ED for an eval before they're let go. This being rural North Carolina, no one had a clue about how to handle this situation. We basically gave them IV fluids, put them on cardiac monitors, and tried not to stimulate them too much. They were extremely polite, and since I was the closest in age to them and had some experience with recreational drugs, I did my best to engage them. As I was starting an IV on the male partner, I asked how he was feeling. "Very safe," he replied. His pupils were as wide as saucers. I miss that job sometimes. I'm a doctor. Not a great story, but I had a kid come into ED after taking some mushrooms at a bush doof and then feeling weird. We told him it was probably the drugs that he took. It hadn't occurred to him that they might be linked. In my town though, the great majority of drug-related presentations are from meth, and they aren't pretty. We get meth-induced heart attacks, meth-induced seizures, meth-induced motor vehicle accidents, meth-induced sexual violence, and my personal favorite, meth-induced deheadery, where a patient is being a dehead in the community, and the police can't take them to the watch house, so they come to hospital instead. I've been spat on, punched, kicked, and called every name under the sun by meth-influenced patients. I've seen tiny psychotic women requiring 4 security guards and 4 police officers to restrain so that we can sedate them for their own safety. Meth is not good, kids. Edit. A bush doof is like a rave in the bush. Sorry for the confusion. When I was a medical student, I saw a guy high as balls on PCP. I was working with a tiny little Asian chick who was a PGI-3 resident. And when we walked into the room, this giant naked white dude, high as hell, sees her and screams that she was the devil or something. Guy lunges at her, and the cop in the room promptly slams him into the bed. I try to help. Like any med student working in the field, they want to match in, and I swing around being the guy who's actively winning the MMA match with the cop and grab him into a chokehold. Excellent bedside manner was a comment I got on my slip that day. I pin him for a femtosecond before he realizes he's crispy as bit on that good old phenylcyclidine. I'm sorry if I didn't spell that the right way. And he springs his upper body forward, swinging me over the back of the bed seat right into his lap. It took me like 5 seconds to realize what happened. I nope right out of there, right before the police tased him into oblivion. Hours later, he was asking us rather politely for some orange juice with all 4 limbs restrained. Did he get his orange juice? Yep, sure did. I was at culinary school in fish fabrication class, and we did a demo/tasting one morning, and a kid got hallucinogenic fish poisoning. At least that's what our chef and the ER surmised. He said he started to see red. Literally everything was red. Raised his hand and asked the chef for help. The chef, thinking the kid was hungover, berated him a little before sending him off to get help. He was okay though. I'm a doctor, but have never seen a patient come in on hallucinogens. But outside of work, my favorite was a Russian guy in a hostel in Amsterdam who forgot how to speak for 8 hours, but could barely write English, so it was like a really long game of Pictionary for the poor fella. I'm a paramedic, but this story is from back when I was an EMT. A handholder, oxygen giver, bandage distributor. Got called at night for a teenage who had ingested mushrooms. On the way to the call, my paramedic partner was unusually silent. After a while, she pipes up. I don't get it. He ate mushrooms. Like what? Portobellos? She grew up very sheltered in the country, so that's how this was gonna go. We get there and the cops walked out a skinny kid wearing only boxers. Took some shrooms, first time ever, freaked out and told his parents, who called 911. My partner is spinning in circles and asking whether she should call poison control. I helped the kid into the ambulance and onto the stretcher, turn the lights down low and tell my partner just to drive to the hospital. The kid is calming down a bit, but he's tripping pretty hard, asking if his parents are Jesus and stuff like that. This was before smartphones, when iPods were the stuff. I had one of those radio transmitters you could plug into the iPod and then play music through the vehicle speakers. It had a remote that I carried on my belt along with a clicker for the ambulance. We were going to the hospital, lights down low, just being chill, when I remembered what my partner and I had been listening to a couple of hours before when we checked our equipment. Thievery Corporation. So I reached down and hit the remote without him noticing. A few seconds go by and he turns to me with the widest eyes I have ever seen. Whoa, what is this music? He was in true bliss. He kept asking me about the music for the rest of the ride. We dropped him off and I wrote "Listen to Thievery Corporation" on a sheet of paper and tucked it into the waistband of his boxers. I like to think there's some dude out there from the upstate New York who fell in love with thievery in high school but doesn't really know why. Physician here. I have not seen anyone on mushrooms, at least not that I knew of, in the hospital. The drug testing for them is actually relatively difficult and not standardized, or at least it wasn't when I was training. I have seen people whacked out of their minds on PCP. We had a patient strapped down to his bed in 4-point restraints. This was actually pretty common with some of the violently psychotic patients in Philadelphia where I trained. I watched the guy somehow shake the bed to the point where he was able to stand up and waddle forward, still attached to the bed in his restraints. As a medical student at the time, I'd just go out of there and let the professional work that case. Patients on PCP will shatter glass, break bones, etc. and feel nothing until they calm down. I have also seen a patient with Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. These patients will disturb you. Lesch-Nyhan is an enzyme disorder which culminates in extreme neurologic symptoms. These patients are classically known to self-mutilate, gouge their own eyes out, etc. The patient I briefly came into contact with would attempt to bite anyone the moment they walked by or got too close. It was super disturbing because it was completely without malice. This patient was also in 4 points restraint, by the way. I'm not a doctor, but I was working as a paramedic at a music festival when we got called to a kid tripping on who knows what. The guy had climbed to the top of a portable generator stadium light. So he's 20 feet in the air, on a light pole, staring onto this blazing midnight sun, screaming, "I'm a moth, going to the flame!" We had several cops, firefighters, and myself standing at the base for 30 minutes discussing how to get him down without killing him or us. The entire time, a crowd of people on drugs is surrounding us to see how it all plays out. Do we get a ladder truck and try to coax him down? What if he won't go? Do we spray mace up there? What if he falls? All of a sudden, this greasy-looking janitor walks up, turns off power to the generator, turns on his flashlight and aims it at the Mothman. Dude looks at the flashlight on the ground, scambles down and follows it to the medical rent like a puppy about to get a snack. I'm embarrassed that none of us thought about that. This wasn't his first Mothman rodeo. And with that one, we end in this video. Have a good one, brothers. Bye.